Pope Pius XI wrote an encyclical on the Sacred Heart of Jesus, where he talks about the ministry of the angel in the agony of the garden and how we can join that angel in the mission of consoling Christ. So I'd love for you to reflect on this insight that how we live today impacts in a beautiful way or a horrific way what Christ endured in his passion.
You just gave the answer I would give. So that letter is a particularly favorite letter of mine. So I say two things maybe. So the first is to make sure that we understand the passion more fully than perhaps most of us do. Meaning what? Meaning Jesus and his passion is by all means making atonement for our sins. So, I mean, he's hanging right behind me. He's also revealing to us the Father and who the Father is, and who the Father is love. So when you look at the cross, you don't see anything so much as you see the love of God. But the thing that most people don't take into account, I find, and which has been so transformative for me, is to keep in mind, so the one who's hanging on the cross behind me is the one who made the universe, and the universe is 90 plus billion light years across, and you can't nail him to a cross. Like Jesus, so we use the language like Jesus is a victim. Well, that's true, but it's also not true. Jesus, nothing on the cross is happening to him. Jesus is the one who's always in control. And I think the thing we have to keep in mind to balance what you're saying or putting forth is the other thing that the Lord is doing on the cross is he's going to battle. That's the real battle. And he's going to battle against the one who's bound the human race, from whom we cannot escape. And he does it in an extraordinarily clever way, and he does it by hiding in flesh. So Satan is deceived on the cross into thinking that he's going to capture this man like he's captured every other man since Adam's rebellion or falling for the first deception. But in fact, what Jesus is doing on the cross is, yes, making atonement, and yes, revealing the Father's love, but he's something like a Trojan horse, which is kind of a favorite image of the fathers of the church. They don't use that language. They might use fishhook or mousetrap or something like that. He's trying to get into the strong man's house so as to liberate us. That's just really important to keep in mind, I think, as we start talking about how he's making atonement and how we can console him. Otherwise, you get an image of Jesus like Jesus is, somehow lost his superpowers on, Holy Thursday night and Good Friday, and then they suddenly come back on Easter Sunday. But the Good Friday is not a defeat. The cross is a victory. It's not a defeat. And Easter Sunday is a confirmation of that. Now, that said, let's go to your question. I find that passage in the Holy Father's writings about consoling his heart, or kind of like stepping into the ministry of the angel, to be an amazing thing to reflect on. I don't understand how that works, quite candidly. But I do find it a helpful way to pray, to say, okay, so Jeremy Driscoll, who's the abbot at Mount Angel in Mount Angel, Oregon, I heard him say one time that the Lord on the cross and in his passion, so the whole Paschal mystery is something like a car slamming on its brakes. And so if you watch a car slam on its brakes in slow motion, the first thing it does is it lurches forward, and then it rocks backwards, and then it comes to a standstill. And he says that's what Jesus is doing in his passion. Like he lurches forward and he grabs all the sins of all of humanity that's going to live after him, and he pulls them to himself. And then he lurches backwards and he grabs all the sins of everybody since Adam, and he pulls them to himself. And then he comes to a standstill like this. Because he's the God-man. And so if that's what's happening in the Passion, and the Passion begins in Gethsemane, then when I pray sometimes, I just pray, Lord, bring me, or Holy Spirit, bring me into the garden. Because I know he's absorbed my sin into himself in his scourging and in his being nailed to the cross and in his crowning with thorns. But let me right now somehow be a means by which I can comfort him, not just torment him, or not just be a means by which he's suffering, I should say, but be a means by which I can comfort him and tell him now how much I love him and how sorry I am. And to be there on behalf of those, it's kind of like the prayer that the angel teaches the children at Fatima, I love, I adore, I ask forgiveness for those who do not love and who do not adore. So, Lord, on behalf of all those who ignore you, who take for granted the gift of life, who trample on the cross, I'm here. So somehow, Lord, I pray that my love, as weak and pathetic as it is, and fickle as it is, at this moment in time, is a comfort to you. I don't know how to think of it other than that.
That's very beautiful, Father John. I love how you're drawing out the, let's call it the paradoxical aspect of the truths of our faith, that we have to uphold two elements at the same time in order to understand either one correctly. You're talking about Christ crucified as a confession of the sins of the world and a confession of the love of the Lord. It's both simultaneously. And so being in the garden in both ways, simultaneously saying, Lord, I'm so sorry, but Lord, I love you, is this powerful mystery.